The DVD for the 2000 film Gladiator includes a short deleted scene named Fed to the Lions, where the story's heroes catch sight of Christian prisoners fed to the lions out on the arena floor. The scene is very calm and very grim. But were Christians really killed this way in ancient Rome? And would Emperor Commodus, the villain of the film, who ruled at the end of the 2nd century, have overseen these atrocities? Stories of people getting fed to the lions go all the way back to the Old Testament, with the story of Daniel surviving his ordeal in ancient Babylon, in modern Iraq. A folk tale from the 2nd century tells the story of a 1st century Roman slave, Androcles, who was spared by the lion he had earlier helped during the time of Emperor Caligula. And just a couple of decades later, Emperor Nero is said to have thrown Christians to the lions, after blaming them for starting the infamous fire that burned the city of Rome. This scene is from the 1951 film Quo Vadis, and is much more violent than the deleted scene from Gladiator. Let's look at how the rising obsession with violence in ancient Rome began to include wild animals from all over Europe and Africa. The venationes, or hunts, began as straightforward exhibitions of exotic animals. For example, Julius Caesar was instrumental in bringing the first giraffe to Rome, an act that won him great praise. However, eventually the sight of unusual animals grew tiresome to the Roman people, and it was decided that the best way to spice up the displays would be to slaughter them. The wild beast displays took three principal forms. Firstly, various animals were pitted against each other in fights to the death, which were supposed to be illustrative of the primal chaos of the natural world and its subduing and control by Roman might. Secondly, the bestiarii, wild beast fighters, who were also known as venators, entered the ring to hunt them with a variety of weapons. In the third and final form the beast displays took, men and women condemned to death were forced into the arena to face the beasts. The punishment was called ad bestias, to the beasts, and was considered, along with crucifixion, to be the most shameful of all punishments. Christians were thrown to the beasts because their refusal to acknowledge the gods of the state was considered a particularly heinous crime. How do we know these stories are actually true? The fact is that there are no genuine records of any Christians being put to death in the Roman Colosseum. It was only later that Christian writers invested heavily in the Colosseum as a shrine of the martyrs. One unofficial record is a letter from St. Ignatius, a bishop of Antioch in Syria, who was condemned to the beasts at Rome in AD 107, which was 70 years before the reign of Commodus. He wrote, "Let me be fodder for the wild beasts. I hope that they will make short work of me. Cruel tortures of the devil, only let me get to Jesus Christ." There are a few notable condemnations to the beasts during the time of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor at the beginning of the film Gladiator. The 2007 book, The Big Book of Women Saints, describes an event that happened near the end of Marcus Aurelius's 19-year reign. Of the 49 Christians arrested in Lyons, France, in the summer of 177, the slave Blandina was considered the most fragile. In the end, however, Blandina set an example of courage that inspired Christians for generations. 24 of Blandina's companions were beheaded, others died in prison, and 2 men were roasted to death. During the gladiatorial games, they tied Blandina to a wooden cross in the arena. When none of the wild beasts would touch her, she was cut down and sent back to prison. But on the last day of the games, Blandina and Ponticus, a boy of 15, were ordered to swear by the Roman idols. Ponticus refused and was immediately put to death. Blandina was wrapped in a net and thrown down before a wild cow that tore her limb from limb. The bodies of Blandina and the others were fed to the dogs. What remained was burned, and the ashes thrown into the Rhone River. Today, a post at the center of the ruined Roman amphitheater commemorates Blandina and her companions. So we see how the governors of Roman provinces persecuted Christians, not directly the emperor himself. But should we be surprised this happened during the reign of Marcus Aurelius? According to an imperfect Google translation of the archived Russian book Persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire, and in the 2021 translation of the 2019 German book Christian Persecution in Antiquity, Marcus Aurelius in 177 banned Christianity by law. Per the persecution of the church, they were virtually outlawed and provoked. The emperor, a devotee of Stoic philosophy, viewed alien cultic practices with skepticism. He had no sympathies for Christians. In his meditations, he wrote that readiness to face death must arise out of one's own convictions, rather than out of a desire to flaunt one's death, as in the case of the Christians. The 2016 book, The New Testament, A Historical Introduction to the Early Christian Writings, includes a long quote from the emperor where he accuses Christians of infanticide, cannibalism, and sexual debauchery. He therefore ordered the search for Christians and to torture them to turn them away from superstition and perseverance. Those remaining firm were subject to the death penalty. Persecution simultaneously raged in different parts of the empire, in Gaul, Greece, and in the East. We have information about the persecution of Christians at this time in the Gallic Leon, where Blandina was executed, and Viennes. According to Wikipedia, the Syrian martyrs were a company of 12 North African Christians who were executed for their beliefs on 17 July 180 AD. This was just 4 months after Marcus Aurelius passed away while on military campaign in Germany. It was the last of the persecutions during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, which is best known from the sufferings of the churches of Vienne and Lyon in South Gaul. Not all Christians, however, took a negative view of the emperor. At the end of the century, Tertullian even calls Marcus Aurelius a protector of the Christians. He claims the emperor attested in a letter how on a military campaign it was Christian soldiers' prayers for rain that saved his troops from dying of thirst. This pious legend enjoyed great popularity and is for that reason also preserved in a range of sources. I do not mean to suggest that Stoic philosophy and Christian faith are incompatible. Let's just say the emperor chose to see it that way. While criticizing believers in the old gods would have been a much more difficult task. The successor of Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, who reigned in 180 to 192 AD, restored more merciful the legislation of Trajan. Commodus apparently did not persist with his father's strict policy against Christians, so that the situation of the churches improved significantly. Although not perhaps herself a Christian, Commodus's concubine Marcia was the hub of a Christian cell at the imperial court. She had been educated by the Christian priest and eunuch Hyacinthus, and maintained good contacts with the Roman bishop Victor. For 10 years after Commodus was assassinated, until AD 202, it was comparatively favorable to Christians. But this year, violent persecutions broke out in the various parts of the empire. They were particularly violent in Egypt and Africa. Ironically, some of the people who assassinated Commodus ended up in their own condemnation by the beasts. As described by Wikipedia, paraphrasing an online translation of the Russian book, The Rulers of Rome, Biography of Roman Emperors from Adrian to Diocletian. After the overthrow and assassination of Commodus, The new emperor, Pertinax, threw to the lions both the servants of Commodus and Narcissus, who strangled him. Even though Narcissus, a wrestler and Commodus's personal trainer, brought the new emperor to power, he committed a crime of murdering the previous one. The imperfect literal translation is, "He cast the lions of Narcissus, who strangled Commodus." Persecution of Christians continued in the Roman Empire until it was ruled by its first Christian emperor. As described in the 2009 book, How Rome Fell. Emperor Constantine believed that the Christian God had promised and delivered victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD. Allying with Eastern Emperor Licinius, the two emperors in 313 AD confirmed the Christians' freedom to practice their religion, but went further, returning confiscated property, including the sites of demolished churches. According to Wikipedia, paraphrasing two Russian books, the practice of damnatio ad bestias was abolished in Rome in AD 681. It was used once after that in the Byzantine Empire, in 1022, when several disgraced generals were arrested for plotting a conspiracy against Emperor Basil II. The royal eunuch who assisted them was thrown to the lions. In conclusion, I believe we can say with confidence that Christians were fed to the lions, but let's keep it in context. Christians were not the only victims by far, and their sacrifices were later marketed by writers to elevate the cause of Christianity. Our modern image of the larger-than-life cruelty of the arena is, in part at least, a product of two very different types of investment in such a picture: the boastful exaggeration by Roman emperors, and the boastful denunciation by Roman Christians. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel for new videos every week or two, and see the description below for a list of films, books, and online resources featured in this video.